So for those of you that can hear, I am going to go ahead and get started at 1:10, just so that in case you're applying for CEUs, you get the full 50 minutes that are required. It sounds like they may have audio now, so let's see if they can hear me. If you can hear me, go through the chat and let me know whether or not you can hear me. All right, sounds like we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Amanda Bulgarelli, and we're going to be covering today changing our ways to match changing brains and talking about our approach to others, especially those that we care for. I am recording this, so if something comes up, you'll be able to have access to it if need be. Otherwise, we'll just try it this one time through, and we will end right at 1 o'clock for you guys. So this training is based on Teepa Snow's positive approach to care methods. If you haven't heard of Teepa Snow, she's actually an OT who started in head trauma and geriatrics over 35 years ago. And PAC, or Positive Approach to Care, is her company. And we're working now to spread awareness and knowledge related to skills and methods that she's developed to better help those with changing brains, and especially with dementia worldwide. So today you'll be seeing myself, Amanda Bulgarelli, and you'll be seeing Dan, my assistant, who will be stepping in to help when I need to demonstrate things. So welcome, and we are going to go ahead and start. Now this training is a little bit different, potentially, than some of your other trainings. It may feel like you should be sitting and sort of just watching and listening, but actually I'm going to ask that to get the most out of this training, that you actually interact and try out things when I describe them. Otherwise, you'll miss out on some of the activities and understanding, seeing it from the perspective of the person living with dementia, so that we can change our ways. Some of them will involve just you yourself, and some of them will be with a partner next to you. So if you're not easily accessible, it might make sense to kind of scooch closer to someone so that you can interact and be a partner with them for this training. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Many of you have the handouts. If you don't have the handouts, this is our agenda. We're going to go ahead and start with talking about our relationships. Now, we know that you all work with lots of different needs. And right now we're focused on dementia because that's what we train about. But knowing that you'll be learning some new skills today, I want you to try to think about how else you can use it, even if someone isn't living with dementia. There are a lot of uses for what we do in our daily life. We're going to watch just a quick example of one of our most difficult or challenging behaviors that happen pretty often for us. Now, this one might not be exactly what you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis as therapists, but it's still one of those pieces. This woman has been attending this music exercise class, working to get range of motion. She broke her hip not long ago and is now moving around the room. And the music class has been over for over 30 minutes, close to an hour, and the staff this entire time have been trying to get her to stop doing what she's doing. So check this out and see what you think about this challenging behavior.
Challenging behaviors, that's how we see it. They're misbehaving. They have problem behaviors. We've got to do something about this.
Okay, so we're going to pause there and we're going to come back to this video later. But what do you notice about this woman and her overall stance? What other physical issues might she be having? Where might you be called in to help? Remembering she broke her hip not long ago, what skills do you see her using? And what skills do you think you would be asked to assist with or help? When you look at her as well, I want you to think about what stops you from getting your job done. How does this relate to some of those challenging behaviors that you see on a daily basis when you're trying to get your job done? Now, for just a few seconds here, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. I want you to think of a let me go ahead and stop so you can see me. I want you to go ahead and think about this part of you right here, a very important part to your body. This is your hand, and when you look at your hand, I want you to see, yeah, this is me, my caring hand, my thoughtful hand. This is what I do my work with every day. This is how I help others, and this is how I guide and show skill. And for the most part, you're probably pretty good at it. So take a look at yourself and check out this caring, thoughtful hand that you've got. Now, go ahead and turn it over. And what's back here? On the back side of our hand, that's our agenda or our job. What things, when you go in the morning, are on your task list? How many steps are you supposed to do? How much paperwork do you have to do? How much time are you supposed to spend? And what keeps you from getting these things done? Well, you've got all these challenging behaviors that have come up. You've also got time crunches, meetings, other people's agendas. This is your agenda. Front, caring, thoughtful hand. And the back, your agenda. So now turn to your neighbor. And I want you to go ahead and take that care, that thoughtful care that you provide on a daily basis. And I want you to look at it really carefully and look at the person that you're about to help. And I want you to go back and look at it again. And then I want you to take that care and turn it over because you've just gotten your task list for the day. Now take your care and shove it in the person's face. Shove it really tight and really close in there. How many of you with a hand in your face are thinking, oh, thank you so much for the help. Thank you so much for your care today. Instead, what is it that you want to do? That's right, you want to push back. Well, you've got your list, your task today, don't you? So they can't push back. You have to get the task done. And what happens, unfortunately, for the most part, is that what do you end up doing with the person? You end up fighting with them. And what kind of relationship do you have with them? Not a very positive one. What happened to all that care that you had? Yeah, it went right out the window. So instead, when you're here and you're forcing and you're finding yourself pushing and pushing and pushing and you've got resistance, take just a moment and ease off. Don't let go because you have to still get it done, but ease off. What happens automatically? Suddenly, I was looking at my task before and all I could see was my task. And when I move that out of the way, I can see the person in front of me and I can offer care. So that's just one small piece of what we do with PAC. But there's a lot to that. How do you let go of your task list? You can't because it's still there. How do you ease off and make it work for both of you? So at PAC here, we believe, first of all, that obviously the relationship is our most critical part. Without the relationship, you only have the resistance and the challenging behaviors that we talked about before. Especially when someone's living with dementia, they may not remember the exact task or the skill that you helped them develop, but you can sure as heck bet that they remember you as a person and whether they like you or not. They may not remember why they like you or don't like you, but they will definitely have that emotional attachment. For just 10 seconds, I want you to think back to elementary school, a very specific math lesson that you remember. It has to be a very specific lesson on a specific day. It can't be a topic. Go ahead and take 5 seconds right now, think about it, and come up with it. How many of you were able to come up with a very specific math lesson on a specific day? Probably not very many, but try this one. Think back, now you have 5 seconds again, to a very specific teacher or person from elementary school. Go. How many of you were able to come up with someone? It's a lot easier to think about someone and your relationship with them. That emotional connection that we share with others is so critical. And at PAC, we believe it's really the key to making life worth living. We offer that. We are the ones providing the care and the relationship. People living with dementia are actually doing the best they can in any given moment. It's up to us to see that they're doing their best and change or adapt how we're helping so that it doesn't become a battle. And last but not least, of course, we have to change because their brains are changing enough on their own. It's our job to make sure that we change and shift to meet their needs. So we're going to quickly look at what dementia is, because there's a lot of talk out there about what dementia is and how it affects our lives. But go ahead and think of some words that you hear thrown around when you hear, what is dementia anyway? Might you hear Alzheimer's, memory problems, old-timers disease? Yep, I bet you've heard more than that. So go ahead and take your big black magic marker and write the word dementia in the air. And put a big equals sign, because many people think dementia equals Alzheimer's, and they're exactly the same. So write out Alzheimer's. Now put another big equal sign, because the big one that people know about is memory problems. So write memory problems. Now take your big red marker and put a big slash through memory problems, and put a big slash through Alzheimer's, put a big slash through dementia. Because here's the deal. There's 3 strikes, you're out. That's not what dementia is. When we look at dementia, it's actually an umbrella term. There are over 90 different kinds of dementia or lead-ins to dementia, and even Alzheimer's, they've decided maybe there's not just one type of Alzheimer's. So when we talk about dementia and we only focus on memory problems, what happens is we miss a lot of the other pieces that are going on. You can see here we have some of the major types of dementia. Dementia is not a diagnosis, it's not a specific disease. We have some types of dementias down here that are more specific, but there are lots of others that we didn't even list here. There are 4 things that we know to be true about dementia, though. Number 1, the brain is dying. There are at least 2 parts of the brain at any given time actively dying when you have dementia. When you're living with dementia, it means that it's chronic. So the first piece, the brain's dying. The second piece is that it's chronic. This is something that you live with. Any guesses on how long, once you've been diagnosed, you live with dementia? Yeah, it depends on the kind, but anywhere between 8 to 12. Someone in my last class is at 20 years. It's a long disease. It's a long condition. This is something that's chronic and it's with you and it stays with you and it changes constantly. So the third piece is that it's progressive. It's not stagnant. This is not a disease that once you start, you know exactly how to adapt and change at each given moment. In fact, it changes as you progress through in lots of different areas. The parts of the brain that are dying, possibly new dementias that you may get, or other health impairments. There's always a progression. Something is always changing. And last but not least, it's terminal. Now, when we say you've got dementia, it can feel like a death sentence right away. But we know that this lasts for a very long time. And go ahead and raise your hand in the room if you think you're going to make it out of this world alive. Yeah, that's what I thought. This is not something that only people living with dementia experience. It just gives us more of a time frame of how this will progress and what might happen and what to expect. So our 4 truths again: the brain is dying, at least 2 parts. It's chronic. This is a lifelong illness. It's progressive, it's constantly changing, and it will eventually kill you. We're living longer through lots of things that we wouldn't have lived through before. And so now we've got dementia on the brain. Take just a second to look at this photo. These are two men who died at the same age, relatively same height, build, and same circumference of their head. What do you notice about these two pictures? Are you starting to see some of the color shifts? Darkening of tissue? What does darkening of tissue generally mean? Yeah, it means that things are dying. Are you seeing more gaps, more space? What about the overall size? In fact, if you hold up 3 fingers and put down 2 of them, you're left with about 1/3 of the brain at the end of dementia. Now, if only we could see that happening to the outside of the head so that we could know and adapt and change more quickly, but instead we've got to use other cues to figure out what's going on. Now, these are autopsied brains, so you're actually looking at slices and pictures of the brain. When we look at this part of the brain, take your hand, put it on your forehead, and just take it off and look at it. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at just a slice of the front part of the brain called the frontal lobe. This is actually where you have your executive control center. So there's 6 different functions here. You've got impulse control, allowing you to stop and not take the 25th cookie. You've got logic. Now, you didn't drink all that coffee but right before you came in for an hour-long talk because you knew what? That's right, that you'd have to go to the bathroom and you don't want to have to run out and run back in. And then, so you were logical. You were able to think it through and then have some impulse control. You also are able to make lots of choices. Anywhere from 5 to 8 options, you can still make a choice that you want. With dementia, we know, we start to limit that. And even in stressful situations, we start to limit that. We may go down to 5 or 3 choices. And when we're very stressed, we have our tunnel vision on, we're down to 2 choices. It's a this or that option. The same with dementia. The front of your brain also allows you to start, sequence through something, stop, and then move on to the next task. Something so simple as getting down to the breakfast table for breakfast in the morning. Well, think about where that starts. Where do we generally approach someone? Yeah, in their bedroom or in the seat. Standing up is a step 1. Taking a few steps is a sequence. And then I've got to stop and do my next step. So thinking through everyday tasks, when we think about how many starts and stops and sequences we have to do, even once I'm sitting at the table, I've got all these things in front of me. I've got a plate, I've got food, I've got a drink, and I've got my utensils. Where do I begin? And then how do I sequence through, stop, shift gears for a drink, and come back to food? We have a lot more steps than we realize when we think about what the front of the brain does. The last 2 are self-awareness. It allows you to look at yourself and look at a situation and feel like you've got it or ask for help. And then finally, one that not a lot of people have, but we're trying to get there. We have our point of view, but we're also able to see someone else's point of view without them butting heads. And instead actually taking them and forming them together so that they meld and they mesh. And having someone else see my side of things. When we look at, another way to look at brains is the positron emission tomography. And actually this allows us to look at living brains, and it shows us glucose burn. And so you'll notice here, the red is the burning hot. These people have been asked to solve a very difficult logic problem. And this part of the brain is showing, the red shows you where the burn is the highest. Yellow is sort of coming down a little bit, green a little bit further down. Light blue, it's on, but it's not really moving. And then the purple are those vascular areas, the areas where we have liquid pumping through oxygen to the brain. We need some of those areas. But you'll notice what happens as we progress through, and these are Alzheimer's patients, and then we have a child here on the end. You'll notice that there are actually big shifts in where the red is located. This top row here, if you take your fingers at your forehead and slice horizontally back, is just a top slice of the brain. The front is up here and the back is down here. This second row across the bottom here is actually taking your fingers at your forehead, slicing through your ears and down to the base of your skull, is a slightly larger cut, and it's a diagonal cut down to the back of your head. Some people notice that the late Alzheimer's and the child brain are actually really similar. But what's not similar about someone who's in late Alzheimer's and a child? Yeah, how we treat them should be different. Is this person the same as a child? No, it just means that they may have similar tendencies or curiosity awareness. This internal part that you can see here, this is what runs our bodies, our brains, our engine, our primitive brain. And you'll notice even late in the disease, it's still there. The reason for this is that it's our threat sensor. When you talk about your amygdala, it throws off my threat sensor when someone's close or startles me. And many of the challenging behaviors that we're going to talk about come from this threatened feeling of, oh my goodness. Your brain either decides that it's going to, when it has a fright, it either decides it's going to fight back or flight. And so that's where we get a lot of our resistive behaviors, is by triggering these primitive brains. You'll also see, if you can notice, this one little tiny piece up here, these little tiny red dots in the very first brain, they pretty much go away right away. That's our hippocampus. That's actually where our memory is stored. So although they're not the same thing, dementia and memory, they are often very related. But what's interesting is that actually there are other pieces stored in that hippocampus that go away fairly quickly as well. That wayfinding, how do I go somewhere and come back, if the way is slightly different, or even if it's the same if I'm getting lost. That might be a cue. Time awareness, not only in my day, but also in where I am in my life. And then learning and memory. Notice this is just a small piece of what's changing with the brain. We already looked at the front of the brain, and now this is in that primal, primitive brain, and yet there is a lot of change happening. So just to categorize it as a memory disease kind of puts us at a disadvantage. We don't see everything else that's happening. This is another big chunk here. This is on your left side. So if you do this one with me, because this one's a little bit tricky, you take your palm of your hand to the left side. That's your left temporal lobe. And we go language on the left and rhythm on the right. We lose on the left and retain on the right. Now the reason that okay, I apologize. So on our left side, we have language center. And with language, we actually have language comprehension. We have understanding of speech and production of speech. And we also have reading comprehension. So this is where we store all of our normal language, our regular language that we use on a daily basis. On the right above that, you'll see actually hearing doesn't change at all. So often what happens is when someone doesn't understand our words and they're living with dementia, what do? No, Betty, don't touch that. No, don't touch that. We get louder, we get slower, and we get closer. Well, how often have we heard, I'm not deaf? Because they're not. Dementia doesn't really affect the hearing portion of the brain. What it does affect is the understanding of our language. Here you can see again the language on the left and the rhythm on the right. Language is greatly affected. Notice here on the bottom, that chunk of the brain, the connections, the white matter, it's pretty much gone. But when you look at the right, notice what we still have to work with. Notice how much there is remaining on the right side. So we said language on the left and rhythm on the right. We've got all kinds of rhythm, even late in the disease. Rhythm is something that we often overlook, along with music, as something that can be used as a positive rather than trying to focus on the left, the language that's not there anymore? How often do we end up telling instead of working with the rhythm that they've already got? This next piece here is vision. So at the back of the brain, which is at the top of your screen, you notice the big changes that happen with vision. We're going to go ahead and take for just a second. I want you to take your hands out to the side, and if you need to stand up, you can. Take your hands out to the side and wiggle your fingers and bring them in until, as you're looking forward, you can see actually both fingers, both sides wiggling without turning your head one way or the other, and without turning your eyes. You can see them both. This gives you your peripheral vision. For most of us, it should be pretty good. We should have almost all the way out. If you're 20, your arms are straight out to the side. Anything over 20, you're gonna bring them in a little bit, and that's okay. That's normal aging. Now with 75, you wanna bring them in about 45 degrees. A normal 75-year-old, 75, we're at 45 degrees in, and that's my field of vision. If you've ridden in a car with someone over the age of 75, you know that it's no longer just a turn of your head to look over your shoulder. What happens? I gotta turn my whole body so I can see what's going on behind me. Still though, I have my peripheral vision, it just shifts and it's a little bit smaller. Now with dementia, what happens is actually bring your hands in at 90 degrees, about 12 inches apart. This is your new visual field, even early in the disease. The way that you can really see that or notice it is to go ahead and put on binoculars. Now, if you put on your binoculars, go ahead and take a minute to just look around the room and notice what you can see and what you can't see. If you can, stand up and try to move around just a smidge, and you'll notice, wow, it sure is different than when I have my eyes open. So binocular vision is one of the first things we get. It's that really central vision. I no longer have any real peripheral awareness. My safety awareness is pretty much gone. After that, we actually have something a little bit different. It's not a loss of vision, but this sensory motor part of our brains starts to change as well. And so I can see these two objects, a toothbrush and a hairbrush, but my brain is confused about which one does what, and if they're both sitting in the bathroom and I know I'm supposed to do something with them, I might accidentally pick up my toothbrush to brush my teeth, or pick up my toothbrush to brush my hair, or take my hairbrush to brush my teeth, which can cause pain and can be very alarming for us as care partners. So object confusion is actually the next step. And then the next one, the last one here, cover one eye and then put your binocular vision back up on the other eye. We're down to what's called monocular vision. Now, keep this eye closed, and with your finger, I want you to reach out and try to touch something either on the floor or the desk in front of you or the chair in front of you, but go slowly and predict the moment that you're going to touch it. Reach very slowly and predict the moment. Many of you have experienced now that it's a lot farther away than you thought it was. That monocular vision really throws off your distance. It's really hard to tell how far away things are. And so what we start to see a lot more of are falls, dangerous situations. So with vision, we've got loss of peripheral vision first, tunnel vision, binocular vision, and then object confusion. Monocular vision comes next, and then eventually loss of vision. So we're actually going to use binocular vision because that one's pretty important, and it affects what we do. When you take data in, you first take it in with what you see. When you hear a loud noise, you turn to look. When you feel something touching you or crawling on you, you look to see what it is. We use vision first. Then we use what we hear. I can't take in language, though, with dementia, so we're needing to use a lot more of what we see. However, we sometimes forget that step. So what you see, what you hear, then it's what you feel or touch. what we often do, especially as therapists, is jump right in with the touch because it feels like they're not understanding my words. I'm just going to go ahead and try and see how we go. Sometimes you're successful, but sometimes we may startle because they didn't get enough visual data. The last two are smell and taste. So with our visual cues, we actually show what's going on rather than just telling. Because remember, that left side of the brain is severely damaged, and we don't want to lose the person and the relationship by trying to do too much telling. The last one is touch, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so we can do a simple activity. So you've got visual, and if you only use visual cues, you're going to be okay. So visual comes first. Visual is non-threatening, and it also allows me to communicate with someone who's losing language. The second one, if you use it by itself, verbal. Now, what happens when I start doing this? Does that feel like a positive relationship, or does it feel like you're being told off? Because if I start to tell you something and you're not understanding it, how does my tone shift, and what things do I say to make you start to understand me, because you're not understanding what I'm trying to say to you? And all I asked you to do was just put your arm up here so that I can help you get strong. I'm getting frustrated, and all you're getting is the rhythm of my speech on the right. You're getting that I'm angry, and you're getting that I'm frustrated, and you're not understanding my words. So when we have this one by itself, we get ourselves into trouble. And last but not least, you got it. When I use touch first, it's like a rude gesture because it startles you and you're not expecting it. So very quickly, turn to your neighbor, and we'll demonstrate here. And one of you is going to have binocular vision, living with dementia with binocular vision. Now, even before you start, what do you notice? Is the person too close? Does it feel like maybe you wish they'd back off a little bit? It's pretty impressive what just trying this out and looking at someone and realizing, wow, there's nothing else there when I have binocular vision. Their face is all I see. So we're already setting off that right amygdala, the fright. And if I can't flight, then I'm gonna fight. So we're setting ourselves up for failure in this way. So if you turn and shift your body just a little bit out of their direct frontal contact, you'll notice that they actually have room to see now something other than me. So before we even try anything else, I want you to notice on your partner that actually they've got something on their shirt, a little oatmeal or something from this morning, and you wanted to tell them, but they didn't hear you, and so you want to just help them out. So go ahead and reach over and just brush it off of your neighbor. Yeah, I bet that was very startling, especially if you're a woman, because what am I not thinking about is the fact that go ahead with your binoculars and look down. Can you even see your chest? Can you see that spot of oatmeal that I was talking about? And if you didn't get my verbal, So how can I use my visual cues? So instead, try this one with your neighbor. Make sure they can see you. Point to yourself first, and then point at them and see if they can notice. Not quite, but let's just see if they'll let me try it this time. You do it. Yeah. If that doesn't work, okay, but at least I've tried my visual first. So there's some visual cues that we want to try out with our neighbors because it feels very confrontational if I just touch first. As we approach people, we want to think a little bit about how we're approaching and going back to the idea of those 3 zones of human awareness. So when you're 6 feet out or more, beyond the reach of 2 people's arms extended fully, that's our public space. We're okay with people being there as long as they're not coming at us very quickly. This is where we have all our visual interactions. And actually, this is where we start to interact with someone on a more personal level. But before I go into personal space, I've got to get your permission. We know that we're lacking verbal understanding and language comprehension. How do we get that permission when we can't talk or ask for permission? Well, we're going to show you that in just a minute. But being invited into each level of these 3 zones of human awareness is very important, because if I just jump right in like I did before with the touch, then I startle and I can set myself up for failure, and the interaction's not going to go how I want it to go. So I'm starting with my visual at public space. Then I can move into conversational space or personal space. If I'm matching my verbal and my visual, then I've got a really good combination. Last but not least, I can add in touch, because at that point I'm in someone's intimate space. If I can touch them, they can touch me. So this is where we get ourselves into a little trouble, because we jump right over the invitation into someone else's space. We're going to talk a little bit about this positive physical approach now. So I'm going to pause here for a second, and we're going to demonstrate a little bit of what I want you to try with your partner if you have space. I don't know what the space is like because I can't see you guys. But initially, when you approach someone, you start about 6 feet out. So your hands are here. And when we're both standing, it's a little bit easier. If you wanted to put on your binoculars, the person living with dementia will have on their binoculars. When I come in, if I actually just reach out my hand for a handshake, much like dusting the oatmeal off his shirt, he doesn't see it, because when you have your binoculars on, my hand is out of his visual range. So I may think that he's ignoring me or doesn't want to say good morning, but actually the language is gone and his visual isn't seeing what I'm doing. So when we start our positive physical approach, we actually start at that 6-foot range, and we want to bring our hand up near our face and pause. This is where you're asking for permission. I'm not asking him, hey, good morning, Dan, can I come into your space? What I'm saying with my body is, I'm here, I'm friendly, my name's Amanda, and you are. And then I'm slowly reaching out my hand. The reason being, if you have on your binoculars, if my hand is still, you can track my hand all the way down and reach out your hand back. So I'm going to try it. Good morning, Dan, it's Amanda. When he reaches his hand out, what have I already got? I've gotten permission to move closer. So at this point, I can enter his personal space. And we already have a touch. The tricky part is, if you've ever been working with someone who has brain change and you get stuck in a handshake for too long, what can happen to your hand? You can squeeze the heck out of it, and can it hurt really badly? Absolutely. So instead, Teepa's developed this next step. You and a partner, you want to do it right hand to right hand. You and a partner, normal handshake, and then very quickly we get into what's called hand under hand. Your hands come up, your thumbs still hook, and you make what looks like a butterfly. So you go palm to palm, and then you can close your fingers down around. So it should make so that you've got a really solid handhold, and then the person living with dementia actually goes on top. But because I'm still out in front, it makes this an awkward hold. So instead what I do is I actually shift to the side so that he can see in front of him. I'm out of his visual field, but I can simply pump my hand to get his attention, and then I can gesture and I can guide. So this hand under hand skill, what it does is it allows my skill fingers, my 3 skill fingers, to serve as his losing skill fingers. So he feels like his body is doing, but my hand is actually the one that's guiding the interaction. So that's it. Then I connect with him as a person. You look nice today. It's so good to see you. I don't want to say anything really important in long sentences because, again, it becomes all verbal. If I want him to do something, now's the chance to use my visual first, match my verbal, and then use my touch connection here. So if I want Dan to try something out, I can say, hey Dan, we're going to take this hand, we're going to put it right over here. Hand over here, okay? Oh, yeah. Okay. And now if I'm feeling like Dan's got this movement and he's working this out, can I let go and see if he can try it on his own? Notice I've got proprioceptive pressure here at his joint to make sure it's comfortable. Now, if he's in the middle of something, knowing the front of his brain is missing, well, I've got to stop him from this before I ask him to do something else. So again, I want to get his attention visually. Hey, Dan. Wait for him to acknowledge me. Reach out my hand and regain that hand under hand connection. Now his hand is on top and I can start my next task. So taking a little more time in between activities to help them start, sequence, and stop before moving on to something else. So you won't probably have a chance to fully try out your PPA right now, but it gives you something to work on as you move through. And you'll have this handout so you can check it out and try out the different steps. In the video that we're going to watch, I want you to see if you can identify where TIPA uses these different pieces. Stop moving at 6 feet out, giving the high sign in your name, offering your hand, waiting for permission, moving slowly into a supportive stance, that means to the side. Notice her shoulders, hand under hand, and then getting low or getting to their level. If they're already standing, you can stay standing. If they're sitting and you're standing, you may want to get down near them or next to them. There's a great chair you can have with you at all times, or make sure that you set them in an area that you can sit next to them. And then you're going to make that connection, the personal connection before you get to your task, remembering the caring side of your hand, not just your task list. Then and only then you can deliver that message. What is it that you wanted them to do? Little step by little step. I would play this video for you, but we're running low on time, so I'll save it and we'll go ahead and jump right into the challenging behavior. See if you can see the positive physical approach. So we're going to pause there. I'm going to jump ahead to where you actually get to see the interaction. Knowing that challenging behaviors often stem from our inability to start with visual, move to verbal, and then to touch, think about what TIPA does here using positive physical approach to change this challenging behavior that's been going on for over 30 minutes. So what did you notice? What did she try? At first, her approach didn't quite work because she went a little bit too close. And then instead of forcing her agenda, she tried to show first using visual, used a few audio or verbal cues, and then finally got to a place where she could touch. Now, if you're interested in checking out more of these videos, on the top of your handout, you've got the teepasnow.com website, and these videos are all free for you to check. The last piece that we're going to cover before you guys go are just a couple spots that we've got that can help you out along the way. This National Institute on Aging, see if it'll pull it up here in a second. There's a really cool piece that will be really helpful for you guys on hospitals and how to prepare. And these are geared towards families, but something as simple as an emergency bag or working with hospital staff, you can start to understand or give resources, and you can start to see what we've done to help others understand how to process through this and take it to the next level. The other piece here is MedBridge, which allows for OTs and PT specific skill, and TIPA has done quite a few videos with them on how to communicate and how to work with those living with dementia that are specific to OT and PT skill. Last but not least, your biggest help is going to be that hand under hand technique. So remembering going in for a handshake, locking thumbs, closing your fingers down, and then the person who's living with dementia gets to be on top. They're the ones in charge, even though your skill fingers are the ones working. The good news about hand under hand is that it doesn't work to damage the back of the hands, noticing over time how with age we lose those fatty pads, which can lead to some of those bruising or painful injuries that we've seen so many times. Using hand under hand, we actually provide the skill and we don't pressure any part of the hand that doesn't have that fatty pad. You can use it to stand, to walk, to drink, to sit down. You can use it as comfort. You can get them started. You can help along with detail, or you can even change direction in what you're doing. So thinking about what pieces did you take away from today? What new knowledge do you have about the brain, about dementia, or about some of the skills that you can try to work on? If you're giving it just 5 minutes a day, that's all you need to make an improvement in what you do. So that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know it's been a lot all at once, but like I said, if you have any questions or if there's anything that you're interested in learning more about, then you do have a handout and you will be able to contact us. And if you didn't get the handout before, don't worry, we'll get it to you afterwards. All right, thank you so much, everyone. It was really nice sharing with you. I didn't get to see you, but feel free to send me any questions or comments that you have. My name again is Amanda Bulgarelli, and I'm with the Positive Approach to Care.